Grateful and honored to have Krishna Das here with us. We'll do it short and sweet. There's Swamini and he's not here, so yes. And we'll start with the Gajanana, the Invocation. So you're welcome to join. Gajananam Bhutaganadi Sevitam Kapita Jambopala Sarabhakshitam Umasutam Shoka Vinashakaranam Namami Vigneshvara Pada Pankajam Shadananam Kumkumaraktabaranam Mahamatim Divyamayoravanam Rudrasya Sunam Surasainanatam Guham Sadaham Sharanam Prapadye Ya Kundandu Tushararadavala Ya Shubra Vastra Vrita Ya Vina Varadenda Mandita Kara Ya Shveta Padmasana Ya Brahma Chuta Shankara Pravitivir Devai Sada Pujita Samam Patu Sarasvati Bhagavati Nisheshwajadyapaha Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Sarchitananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Shri Shivanandaya Te Namaha Shri Vishnudevanandaya Te Namaha Om Sarvamangalamanganye Shive Sarvata Sadike Sharanye Trambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavae Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavai Om Shanti 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 Om Peace 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 Om Bolo Satguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai Om Bolo Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Let's give a big hand to Krishna Das.
Do you always do what you're told? All right. Thank you. That was the whole Vedas in 2 minutes. Excellent. So, anybody have anything to say? Okay, see you later. Okay.
Yes, I'm just curious about your first interaction with Maharaj and how you felt at the time, what happened in that interaction, and how you knew that he would be your guru.
Okay. My first conscious interaction, if you could call it that, with him, with Maharaj, was when I met Ramdas. And he had come back from India, and he was living at his father's place in New Hampshire. And I heard about him from some friends of mine. So I went up to see him. And well, okay. But the minute I walked into the room where he was sitting sitting on the floor on the other side of the room, leaning back against the wall, and his eyes closed. So the minute I walked into that room, I knew that whatever it was I was looking for was real. And it was in the world. And you could find it. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life. From that moment on, I didn't know what it was or how to find it, but I just knew, I had read all the books, all 3 of the books. We're talking about, the 1500s here, a long time ago. There was just a few books around: Autobiography of a Yogi, Gospel of Ramakrishna, Zen and Japanese Culture, a couple of books. But this was real. This came from inside me, or from somewhere. And from that moment on, I was aware of this presence whenever I looked, when I wasn't busy doing other things. And then I spent about 2 years with Ram Dass, hanging around in the States. And then I went to India to meet Maharaj. Now, I had been feeling, all we had was these little pictures, little black and white pictures of him. And but the minute but I had been feeling him everywhere. It was like the air. So when I first walked into the room with him, it was very confusing because I couldn't figure out how all this got into that little body wrapped up in that blanket. How did that happen? How is it? It was, my mind kind of went like, But he just, that was, we had been, me, Rameshwaras and Danny Goleman, we had gone to India together through London. In those days, you found these really cheap flights, bounced over. So we were in London for a few days, and we met Swami Muktananda there. And he said, well, you're getting into Mumbai. Why don't you go out to my ashram for a week and chill out before you go see your guru? We said, okay. So we went to Ganesh Puri for about a week. And I had a funny experience there. So I was reading a book called Ramakrishna and His Disciples, which is a beautiful book. And I don't know if you know the story about Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. The first time I think Vivekananda came to see Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna put his foot on Vivekananda's leg, and Vivekananda started to go out, and he freaked. So Ramakrishna took his foot off and said, okay, not now. So I was, they gave us this little hut to live in up on the hill. There was nothing there. Now it's like a city. So I was lying in bed, and I was reading this book, and I was reading that story. And just as I read that Ramakrishna puts his foot on Vivekananda, I started to go out, and the book dropped from my hand. And, before I tell you that. So when we were in London, we walked into the room where Swami Muktananda was, and he immediately turned to us and he said, these boys aren't English. Come here. So he had us sit in front of him, and he said, come tomorrow morning and meditate with me. Like at 4 a.m. So we didn't have any money. It'd taken us like 3 hours to walk to this place. So at around 10 o'clock, we walked back. We laid down for about 10 minutes, and we got up and walked back. We got there about 4 a.m, or maybe it was 6 a.m, and we were ushered upstairs to his room. And he was sitting on the bed, naked except for a langoti, covered in ash, right? And I went, whoa. And he said, sit down. So we sat in front of him, and he gave us a mantra, and he went to each one of us. So he went in front of me, he put his fingers in my eyes, in my eyeballs. And I thought he was going to pop my eyeballs out. He just like this. And then he banged me on the top of the head. And then he sat down again, and don't worry, nothing happened. Until now I'm in that little hut on the hill at his ashram, and I'm reading this book at this point where Ramakrishna is about to put Vivekananda in samadhi. And the book falls from my hands, and I go out, my eyes go up where he pushed them, and then right where he banged me on the top of the head, I went out through the top of my head, and I'm shooting up through space, and I'm looking at the stars, and this is amazing, and I go, wow, this is great, and I'm flying up, it's fantastic, and I thought, did I just take acid? So then a few days later we went up north, and eventually we found Maharaji at Kenchi temple. So we came in and we bowed down, and Danny had a picture of Nityananda, who was Muktananda's guru. Maharaj says, what's that? And he said, oh, he's a good sadhu. That means he's God on earth. Maharaj knew everything about everybody. If he said he's a good sadhu. So then we put our apples down, and he threw them to the other people in the room. And I went, he didn't take our apples. And he looked at me and said, what did I do? Did I do right? I said, I don't know. He said, did I do right? What did I do? Did I right? I said, anything you do is right. Yeah. What did I do? I don't know. He said, the prasad comes from God and it goes to God. And then he said, I forget exactly how it happened right now, but then he said, something like, if you want it, don't take it. I'm working on that. It's only been 55 years or so. And he said, when you have God, because I was wondering, he didn't really accept the apples, I thought, right? He said, when you have God, you don't need anything. And I just looked like, huh? And he said, when you have God, you have no desires. I went, oh. And then he had us fed, and yeah. But it was really a shift, because what happened was I wound up getting very attached to the body, and which caused me a lot of suffering later. But in the meantime, it was pretty good. But yeah, it was somehow it must have been necessary to go through that. But that feeling of when I walked into the room where Ramdas was sitting, that never changed. That's exactly what it is even right now. That's his presence for me. That's what I call it. Other people call it other things. And that presence is always here when I remember to look. I mean, it's still here when I'm not looking. And then he said, come back in like a week. A week? You know, so we went back to the town and hung around for a while, and then we came back. We started, in that first few months, he would just say, come back in 3 days, come back in 4 days. He didn't let us hang out too much at that time. We had heard all the stories about him from Ram Dass for years, you know. And the feeling was, of course, like I said, it wasn't something new. It was something that we knew from whenever. It was familiar, it was home. He said to KK was there, KK was one of his old disciples, a friend of Ram Dass. He said, these are good boys and they come from good families. We looked at each other like, what? I don't know Maharaj's qualifications for a good family, but it must be something good. And then he disappeared. Jesus. He always calls me at the wrong moment. Then he disappeared and so we thought, okay, why don't we go meditate? So we went to Bodh Gaya and we took these Buddhist meditation courses, like 10-day courses. I don't know, we did like maybe 4 or 5 in a row. And then Ram Dass showed up, and he hadn't seen Maharaj since he came back the second time. So at one point we decided, okay, enough of this Buddhist stuff, let's go find Maharaj. And that's the story about the bus. You know the story about the bus? No? So one day this beautiful brand new Mercedes bus shows up in Bodh Gaya. I mean, this little village. Later we found out the guy was a hash smuggler and the bus was full of hash. We didn't know that. But anyhow, so he was heading back to Delhi. So we decided, okay, we'll go back to Delhi. We'll ask around some of the old devotees that we knew, and we'll try to find Maharaji. So let's say there were 15 of us, 16 of us who got on the bus. And Sharon Salzberg was there, but she stayed. She's been meditating all these years while I've been watching TV. So we get on the bus, and then we had this very intense argument. Some of us wanted to stop at the Mela in Allahabad. There was every year, Kumbh Mela. Every year there's a Mela. Every 12 years it's a Kumbh Mela. So, but this was one of those years when it was just a regular Mela and there's only maybe 10 million people there. But Ram Dass wanted to get to Delhi, and he was kind of the boss, But we were having, an argument, and he was saying, we're going to Delhi, we're not stopping, we got to get there by tonight. No, we want to go, we're passing right by the place, you can't believe, you're not going to go there? It was very intense. Finally, it was agreed upon that we would go, we would see the place, then we'd get back on the bus, and we'd get to Delhi by that night. Okay. So, see, Danny had gone there. He had escaped from one of the meditation courses and gone there for a few days. And then he'd come back and told us about it. So we got on the bus, and the bus pulls up to this area by the river, which maybe a few days before there were 10 million people. There was nobody. Not one human being was there. It was empty. There was a dog walking across the field. I can remember that. So we went, all right, well, let's head back to Delhi. So the bus started to make a long turn in this field, And then Danny said, you know, there's a Hanuman temple in the corner of this field, at the edge of the field. Why don't we go see Hanuman? And then we'll go to Delhi. Okay, we'll go see Hanuman. So the bus makes this long turn right around the edge of the field, heading towards the Hanuman temple. And then walking the other way, in the opposite direction that the bus was going, was Maharaji. He was walking with somebody, and that person later told us, as the bus just about came up to him, he said, they've come. So only one of us saw him. Rameshwara saw him. Otherwise, we would have gone right by him. And then we all jumped. We ran out of the bus. Everybody's crying, laughing, hysterical. And then Maharaji says, okay, follow us. And he gets in a rickshaw with this guy whose name was Dada. And he asked this, so this big, huge Mercedes bus is following this little cycle rickshaw through the streets at about 2 miles an hour. You know. The rickshaw pulls up to a house. Maharaji and Dada go in. The bus stops. We kind of get out. Now what? You know. And a lady comes out of the house and says, come in, have your meal. And we said, our meal? Yes. This morning, Maharaji told us to prepare food for 17 people, that you'd be coming. That's 16 of us and the driver. So, who decided in that big argument about whether we should stop or go or straight or not stop? Who decided that? We thought we were deciding, but obviously, that's not the case, is it? See, those things are always happening. And you kind of got used to it. And you kind of relaxed into that space where you had no secrets. He knew everything. And he still wasn't kicking you out. It was very hard to understand. When he took the keys away from Ramdas to the Volkswagen bus and gave them to me, I kept them with me. They were never more than like 2 inches away from me, because I wanted to drive Maharaji in the car. But I never said anything. I was ready. So about 9 months went by, and we were in Allahabad, and I'm sitting there. Maharaji just turns and says, got the keys? Huh? Chalo, let's go. Yeah. So we walked out to the Volkswagen bus. Now Maharaji was very short. So Dada was walking with him, and he opened the door, and they opened the door, and he had to throw himself up onto the seat, you know? And as he did that, he bashed his head on the door, the edge of the car. I mean, really hard. I almost shat my pants. I said, Dada, did you see that? And Dada said, he did it on purpose. Just get in the car and drive. That is a real devotee. He did it on purpose. For Dada, anything Maharaji did was on purpose. He knew what he was doing every second. So then I get in the car, and I start driving, and Maharaj goes, watch out, you're going too fast, watch out, there's people over there, watch out, be careful, watch out. The whole way to the Sangam, like about 20 minutes, watch out, yeah, people coming, and I'm like, driving. We get to the Sangam, I stop the car, turn it off, we're there for like a minute. He said, okay, let's go back. And the whole way back, same thing, watch out, there's coming up, people coming, you're going too fast. So we get back to the house, okay. A few days later, see, Ramdas had come back to India the second time after traveling around the world with Muktananda. He had met Muktananda in America, and then Muktananda asked him to show him around, and then they wound up going to Australia and then to India. So he had asked Ramdas to come do a pilgrimage with him in that winter, and Ramdas had agreed. So time came to go, and Ramdas said to Maharaj, "Do I have to go?" Maharaj said, "You said you would go, you have to go." So we were sent with him. So I'm driving out of Allahabad, and there's this long turn somewhere, and on one side of the road, the other side of the road, there's a reservoir. And I'm driving, and I'm going too fast. And the bus starts to slide across the road, and the reservoir is right there. We were going right into the water when a huge wind came, like whoosh, and literally the car went about 10 feet back on the right side of the road. And I thought, that's why he banged his head. He did that. It's really difficult for us to wrap our heads around the fact that there are beings that live only to help us. They have nothing more to gain for themselves. They've done it, been there, done that. And they're only here for us. And everything they do is motivated only by one thing: love and compassion and kindness. That's three things, which are one thing. It's really hard because we live in a world where it's an eye for an eye every day. Anybody? Yeah.
You told us the story of the name of the driver, but what is the story behind Krishna Das' name? Who picked the name for you?
One day, I'd been driver for about 9 months or a year or something like that. And I said, all right, that's it, I guess. I'm driver. I wrote it in my diary that night. Next day we go to the temple. I get called into Maharaj's room. He looks at me and said, Arjun, nay, Krishna, nay, Krishna Das. I said, Krishna Das? I'm a Hanuman guy. He just laughed. He said, don't worry, Hanuman served Krishna too. And that's the whole thing. And the story about that is a beautiful story in the Mahabharata, the big war. Krishna is Arjun's charioteer. And every day of the fight, when the fighting was over, Krishna would get down and help Arjun off the chariot because he's the charioteer, that's what he does. The last day of the war, after it was over, Krishna says to Arjuna, okay, every day I've been helping you off the chariot, but today you jump off now and run as fast as you can away from the chariot. So Arjuna does. Krishna steps off the chariot. There was a white flag. All the chariots had a flag, right? There was a white flag with a red monkey on it. The minute Krishna stepped off the chariot, the monkey flew out of the flag and the chariot exploded in 1,000,000 pieces. And Krishna says to Arjuna, he said, Hanuman has been absorbing all the missiles that have been thrown at you. Didn't you notice that in the whole war you never had to change your chariot, where everybody else almost every day had to get a new chariot? In those days they fought with atomic weapons, really, because of the power of the mind. They would shoot an arrow, but they would put a mantra on the arrow. And the one with the most concentration had the most powerful weapon. When two of the same mantras met, the one who had the most concentration and the purest intention that was the most powerful one. And there's a story about Arjuna, who was the second greatest archer. He's usually called the greatest, but actually his older brother, who was unknown to them at the time, was greater. But they were all with their guru. Their Dronacharya was their weapons guru. And all the archers were lined up. And Dronacharya asks one guy, he said, "What do you see?" And the guy says, "I see a tree." The next guy, "What do you see?" "I see a tree with a bird on a branch." Next guy, "What do you see?" "I see the branch and the bird." Next guy, "I see the bird." Next guy, "I see the feathers of a bird." And finally he gets to Arjuna. He says, "What do you see?" "I see a black spot," which was the eye of the bird. Which is why Arjuna was the greatest archer. He was beyond conceptual thinking. And he saw a spot. He didn't see the eye of a bird. The target was a spot. And that's what made him the greatest. The second greatest. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for everything.
Hold on,
Krishna
can you
does.
turn up a little bit?
Thank you for everything you teach us here. Thank you so much. First is a song request for tonight. Could it be possible you sing "I Want You to Show Me" tonight?
You can request it.
Please, thank you. I'll get it. And the second is, what happened with those times? Are we going to see those times again of that's so much power in us humans?
Not in this age. This is the age of Kali Yuga, they call it. It's the dark ages. We don't see that stuff these days. Some people are open enough to perceive those kind of things, but most of us, we watch too much TV. We're not open for that. We're not. Our senses aren't purified enough. Our mind is cluttered with nonsense. And for instance, they say that Hanuman won't come, even can't come in his real form, but he'll come in a different form, like a sadhu or one time I was in a delicatessen in my local town. This is when I still ate cheese. So I went in and ordered a cheese sandwich. Then I'm waiting in line to pay for the sandwich, and there was this guy standing in front of me in the line, and it was something about this guy. I couldn't, what is it? And so I kind of like went around like to see his face, and he turned away. And I'm behind him. He didn't see me do that, right? I'm like this, and he turned away. I went, did that happen? So I kind of went around the other side, and he turned away. I couldn't believe it. So then he pays for his whatever he paid for, and I'm there and I'm waiting for my change. And he turns to me and he looks at me and he smiles and he says, "It's not in the eyes, you know." And he turns and walks out, and I'm waiting for my change. And what am I waiting for? And I run out, and there's nobody there. A huge empty street. There was no place the guy could have gone. It was really a trip. So they come and they say hello, but they don't necessarily tell us what's going on. But they say you can't really see those forms at this time because we're too dense. And if we did see those forms, we'd just explode. It'd be over. So, but just work on your concentration. Anything could happen. Yeah, there's somebody here in the front here.
Hi. I'm just wondering, I just recently lost somebody very close to me suddenly and unexpectedly. And I'm just wondering if you can kind of talk to us a little bit about grief and loss.
Well, we're human beings, you know, so we're fucked. That's the deal, you know, we have all these emotions. We don't see anything other than our own stuff. And we suffer. Our attachments are the things the people we love who are no longer in the body. We miss them. There's nothing you can do about that. You just have to live with it. But you can also recognize that the grief and is actually still a connection. They're still present within you, and actually not in a body, but they're still here. They say that the time of death is written when you're born. And there's no slippage in the system. And you know, I'm at the age now where every other day somebody's popping off. And even though I've been doing this stuff for so long, and all the old devotees that I've lived with and loved and learned from, they're all gone. I'm the old devotee now. God help us. So you just, you know, don't fight the grief. You know, be with it. It's the connection. And they say that those beings who leave the body, they don't want to see us sad. They're still here. They're aware of what we're feeling. They could possibly be aware, depending on how close we are with them. And it hurts them to see us that way. So try to process that too. We have to process that too. A dear friend of mine had cancer. She was in India, and she went to see this really very high lama who she knew. And he just laughed. He said, "Oh, what are you worried about? You've done this so many times before." But we don't see that, you know. We think we are who we think we are. We were born, we're now this, and then we'll be that. That's just one storyline that is not especially accurate. But yet, that's who we are. So, see the grief and live with the grief as connection. And the love, it doesn't stop the love. But you can't hold on to that form. Although the person is still that person. That soul is still the same soul that was in that body that we loved. It's just all about love. And you can't pick it up and take it out, you know, it's just there. So might as well find a way to kind of unfold it and include that person. The person's not gone, the body's gone. But because we think we are our body, we think they were their body. And that's, you know, that's what it is. If we knew who we were, we wouldn't have those issues, but we don't. So inside of that, we have to accept who we are and accept our feelings and not try to push them away. They're not wrong. We can learn a lot. But it's very difficult and it's painful. where are you going to go in this world that it's not like that? One time a very old Swami was coming out of the mountains and stopped in Kenchi. And when Maharaj, he came to see Maharaji, and Maharaji, he just fed him sweets after sweets after sweets. And the guy said, "Oh, in my life, no one has fed me like this." And he was crying, and Maharaj was giving him more sweets and more sweets, more food, more food. Then the guy gets in a car, and being driven down to the train, he gets about 10 minutes away from Kenchi and has a heart attack. And Maharaj said, I fed him and sent him on his way. Oh, did you pick somebody? Yeah. Back there. Oh.
Thank you. It's amazing hearing these stories about these gurus who can further spiritual development, but in the case where there isn't somebody externally, can you share something about developing our relationship with our inner guru or gurus in another realm?
Mm-hmm. I was with this Lama once, and he was giving a workshop, a retreat or something, and when a woman said to him, "Rinpoche, what happens if you fall in love with your guru?" And he looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "You're going to fall in love with the one person in the universe who's promised to destroy you, destroy your ego?" We have the guru thing all wrong, you know. I mean, we think it's like a romantic relationship between two people. It isn't. Guru is not other than who we are. And Maharaji, he knows that. He knows that. I don't know that. And so I get attached to his physical presence. You work on what you have to work on. It's not a mystery, our stuff. All we have to do is look, and we see our stuff. Our shame, our fear, our grief, our selfishness, our anger, the way we treat other people, the way we treat ourselves. Hey, there's enough to work on. And all that's covering up the guru within. The guru within is your own soul, your own being. And a real guru knows that. And as a result, doesn't want anything or need anything from you. Because they are you. So just try to become a good human being. What more can you do? That's all it is anyway. Guru or no guru in the outside world, we still have to live every day and do the best we can. The longing is complicated. The longing for a guru, somebody to love you the way you want to be loved and free you from your suffering and help you on the path. Yeah, maybe. A real guru knows that that's just a storyline. A real guru is not in time. There's no past, there's no future, there's just right now. Right here, where we are. Everyone has that inside. It's actually not inside, because there's no inside or outside, but we talk like that. You can bring one of these great beings to mind, and you can develop a relationship with that person, with that being, whether they're in a body or not. They're still present because they were always present. Just because they're not available in the physical world anymore doesn't really mean anything. That longing, though, it's the saving grace, and it's the thing that ruins your life. Because nothing will ever be enough until that longing is fulfilled. But does that mean that longing will not be fulfilled even if you trip and fall at the feet of a real guru? Because we still have our stuff. I was with Maharaji for 2.5 years, and I'm basically the same schmuck I always was. 55 years later. Give me a break. So it's not like something's going to happen, somebody's going to push a button and all of a sudden everything's going to be great. We still have our stuff to deal with every minute of every day. And if you don't deal with it, it deals with you. And these beings can come and see us in our dreams where we're more open. And if you do have a dream of a saint, they say that we can't manufacture that vision of a saint, that it's them coming to see us. So if you do have an experience like that, that's a really beautiful thing. But once again, it's our own efforts and our own desire to get it together that carries us along. And you don't know if and when you're going to meet a being like that on the outside world, in the outside world. Basically, I think those of us who were there were the ones who just couldn't make it without that. Everybody else was cool. They didn't need it. For myself, that would be true. Can't talk for anybody else. Guru is always present because we are always present. You're going to leave this place and go back to home. You'll be there, just like you're here. And Guru is also there because you're here. There's nowhere you can go where you will not be. And if you're there, the Guru is also there. So, why don't we see that? Why don't we experience that? Well, you know why. So, now do something about it. The longing is what saves us. That's how we feel as we're moving into our own being. We experience it as longing for something outside of us, but it's actually we're being pulled inside. But we feel as if we're longing for something outside, like a guru, or a lover, or a dog. Somebody to love us. That's what we feel like when we're being pulled in. And it's not so much that Maharaji loves us. It was that we were safe to love, to open up. There was no fear of anything. We were home, and our hearts just unfurled. That's what we want. But we think, okay, if that happens, then that'll happen. But it's not like that. That can happen anytime, anywhere. And when we chant, those names are the names of that place in us. every time we chant one of those names, we're moving towards that place where it all is. Whatever form attracts you, whatever name attracts you, whatever chant attracts you, you're being pulled to that. The guru business is really pretty nasty, you know. I've seen so many people destroyed by some asshole, you know, manipulating them, taking their money, alienating them from their families. It's a nasty thing. Don't give yourself away. Don't give yourself away to anyone or anything. The Guru is inside of you already. You can't buy it by giving yourself away. And anybody who's willing to take you, you should run. And the prettier they are, the handsomer they are, the faster you should run. We need to remember to look. We need to figure out where to look and how to look and how to see. And when we do, we'll see everything. We'll know what we need to know. All these practices are purification of the mind. Asana practice, pranayama, purifies the nadis in the body. The prana flows through the nadis. Prana is life. Prana is not just energy. It's consciousness. It's awareness. Anybody? There's somebody in the back who's had their hand up for a while.
Thank you so much for being here and for your teaching.
Hold on one second. Kev, I don't think this is on. I mean, it's barely on.
I don't think I was speaking loud enough.
It's okay, I'm deaf.
Thank you so much for being here and for your teachings. I was drawn to you years ago about your teachings of how to deal with suffering and heartbreak. And you had spoke about attachments and expectations that we put out to the world and how that creates the suffering and the heartbreak inside of ourselves. So I digested that, and I tried to work with that, not to put on expectations on people and situations. But I've been blessed to be a mother. And having children, I've found a lot of suffering and heartache in that. And I'm wondering what you could share with us about children and raising children, but not attaching to the outcome or the suffering that can happen and the heartbreak that can happen from being a parent.
My daughter's here, so I have to be careful. Well, I think the most important thing, of course, is that they somehow know that you love them regardless of anything they do. Is it working or not? Beings are born with their own individual karmas. They're not blank slates when they're born, and they come in with all kinds of stuff just like we do. So the most important thing is that they feel loved. As far as creating boundaries and teaching children about right and wrong and what leads to happiness and what leads to suffering, you'll have to ask Dr. Spock. Yeah, now the light's on. The light wasn't on before. And there's no escape from suffering. Of course, you didn't think it would be like this. That's our problem. We keep doing things and not recognizing what's involved with the whole thing, the whole package. It's like rock stars, you know. I mean, somebody once, I guess I was being interviewed by Rolling Stone, and the guy said to me, "Come on, all these rock stars getting holy, what's that all about? Isn't that just bullshit?" And I said, "No, it's not. These people are like the kings of the planet. Kings and queens, and anything they want, they can get 24 hours a day. They've been there, done that, and they know it doesn't work. But we don't know that yet. We're still hoping that shit makes us happy. And that's not life. I mean, happiness is good. But there's always an end to it. Here. In here, that's not the case. In here, there's no end to that. Real love, real joy. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about people with their own agendas that are different from our agenda. What are you going to do? Just do the best you can. And when you have to say no, you have to say no. No matter what it does. It's not easy. My mother was really hard on me. And many years later, a psychic told me she was hard on you because she didn't want you to turn out like your father. So she had a reason for being hard on me, which I didn't know when I was a kid. All I knew is that it wasn't a lot of fun. You know, we don't know our parents as people. We know them as our parents. Maybe if we live long enough and they live long, we get to know them a little differently. We don't know what they went through growing up. We don't know how many times they had their hearts broken. We don't know what they lost, what they wanted and didn't get. We don't know anything about that. All we know is how it feels in the house. So you try to make that feeling in the house as good as possible, considering everything you've gone through and considering who they are. And just try to keep that atmosphere as open and as non-judgmental as possible. But you still have to say no at times and make boundaries for kids, I guess. I didn't like boundaries. You put up a boundary, I killed it. But anyhow, it sounds good. I'm sure that was very helpful.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I can hear myself also.
it's okay. Yeah, good.
Thank you so much again for being here. It's very inspiring listening to you. I wonder sometimes studying yoga philosophy.
What's
and
that?
just-
Sorry.
Well, being here, studying yoga philosophy, sometimes, they talk about karma, the yogis, accepting your karma, accepting the fact that, and you said it yesterday too, just don't be the writer of the script, just let things be the way they are supposed to be, because you have to work through your karma. But accepting your karma, yet not allowing yourself to become the victim of circumstances and being like, this is my karma, and then you kind of let go and stop fighting or stop putting effort in. Like, how do you find the balance? And how do you know what action to take? Not to override God's action, in a way.
Well, so what you said, like being taken advantage of, that was one of the things you said? Like when you're in a situation and somebody's abusing you, you just accept that? Is that what you're saying? Why would you do that? You say, this is my karma? Why isn't your karma to punch a guy in the face? Why do you just... You can't up-level things in your mind. And there's nobody... Everything can change at any moment. No situation is solid. You can change it with your own actions, with your own inner understanding. So you don't have to accept anything that's negative from the outside world in any form ever, unless you want to. You don't say, this is my karma. If you trip and fall and break your leg, yeah, okay, that's your karma. There's not much you can do about that. But in terms of relationships with people and situations that are fluid and based on two beings or more than two beings relating, can always change. And there's no reason to accept any kind of negativity from anybody at any time. There's different ways to deal with that, which are more or less effective. But certainly it can be dealt with. And certainly it's not cruel fate. Karma is not fate. Fate means there's no change. This is it. But karma is exactly the opposite. It can always change. You can always decide to do this or that, or not do this or that or that. And everything you do changes this moment. So, surrender happens by grace. It's not something we do. So, I have to talk about Ram Dass. Ram Dass was high-flying, golf playing, sports car driving, running around the world talking, giving lectures, and then he had a catastrophic stroke. He couldn't move, he couldn't talk, couldn't do anything for himself. But as the time went on, so there's nothing he could do about that. The physical thing happened, right? Yes, this is karma. But how he lives with it is up to him. And he chose to aggressively, powerfully, and vigilantly be present with it and not get caught in depression or anger, or like the same thing can happen to two people, and one person just is destroyed by it, another person blossoms. So the karma is more interior. What's going to happen in the outside world is going to happen. What's not dictated is how we live with it. We're always free to with great power, face a situation and transform it within, even if it can't be changed outside. Sometimes when we try to change things outside, it just makes things worse. Like trying to change somebody, change the way they are. You can't. You can only let them be who they are, and real love is letting people be who they are, and that in that atmosphere somebody can actually change because they're allowed to let go. They're allowed to drop some of the negativity because you're not reacting. Because if we react, we hold them in that place, just like we're getting stuck in that place. So giving up is not surrender. Surrender means motivating yourself to the ultimate degree to overcome any kind of inner and outer negativity. To fight, to be present, no matter what happens, and no matter who's doing it. If something doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. The main thing, the one thing that we all have to learn in any kind of life, and especially so-called spiritual life, is to trust our own self and to hear what's right for us, at least what we want, and then go for it. Taking into account different sets of circumstances. You say you want to go off to the mountains and be a sadhu and live in a cave? Yeah, right. With the rats and the snakes and the, and then leaving your family without any food. So that's not very good. So within the circumstances of our lives, there's a lot of room to do what we want to do and to become who we want to become. Somebody once asked the Dalai Lama, "Your Holiness, are you happy?" And he said, "Well, I guess you could say I've had a hard life. I had to take over the reins of my country as a teenager. I had to watch as the Chinese invaded and actually killed millions of my people. I had to escape over the mountains. I'm a refugee in another country. But I'm happy." Because inner happiness can be there no matter what's going on in the outside world. And that's the most important thing to know. Just because everything is screwed up out there doesn't mean that we have to be screwed up in here. It's our job to unscrew ourselves. A group of ministers went to see the Dalai Lama once, and they said, "Your Holiness, what's your idea of sin?" He thought about it for a minute and said, "It's kind of a Christian thing, isn't it? There's no sin, original sin in Eastern religion, Eastern philosophy. The word for sin is usually pap, which means what makes you burn. But it's not original evil. It's exactly the opposite. Everyone's soul is 100% pure. Everyone has Buddha nature within. There's no stain on our inner being. Never was, never will be. But that inner being is what's covered up with our stuff. So how do we uncover that in a good way? Well, that's what we're trying to do. No one? Someone? Somebody? Oh.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
You just touched on surrender, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about the role of surrender on the spiritual path and how we do or don't do that and what we are surrendering to.
Yes. Surrender is liberation. It's freedom. It's the release and the transcendent of the delusion of separate self, thinking that we're separate from everything and everyone else. That's what happens when that is surrendered. That ultimately happens only by grace. Surrender has nothing to do with obeying someone or believing something that you don't believe in or making yourself do something that you think somebody tells you you should do. Okay, I'll surrender to that, knowing that it's not right or it feels weird. That's not surrender. Surrender is being with what is without coloring it or manipulating it or trying to make it fit or, being with what is. So we see our stuff and we want to be free of that stuff, free of everything that causes us pain. So the more we see what's going on in us, the more we can let go of stuff. And that's on the road to finally seeing through this belief that you're you and I'm me. Because if everybody in this room is like a little bubble, and each bubble thinks it's separate from the other bubbles, but we're all in this big bubble together. And the little bubbles are very tenuous and very, they keep breaking. Ramdas had a real core of stuff that he hadn't ever been able to deal with, and it was causing him a lot of pain. The stroke absolutely wiped it out. He didn't have one moment off, one moment vacation from the pain, from the wheelchair, from having to accept help from people. He had to become really humble, really open. And he did. And he triumphed over that situation. Because he fully accepted it. He wasn't trying to change it. He no longer wished it to be any other way. In fact, Siddhima had said to him that if he learned this particular prayer to Hanuman, he would walk again. But he didn't really try. He was okay. He didn't want to get caught in trying to make it some other way. But meanwhile, all of us, we wake up in the morning and we wash our faces and put our makeup on and our clothes and we try to look as good as we can. So we're not, when do we come out of our room, looking like shit and not worrying about what other people think? It's very difficult to get to that place. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be appreciated. And the real thing is that we can't appreciate ourselves. So Ramana Maharshi said that what a devotee, a bhakta, feels on the way to liberation is what a jnani or a wisdom, someone who intellectually follows the path of wisdom, is what they feel after liberation. So there's the jnani feels it, the bhakta feels it on the way to liberation, all the bliss and the happiness and the joy and all those things, and then boom, merges. But the jnani, boom, after liberation has the same experiences. So we just have to deal with what we have to deal with, you know. But neurosis won't let us do that. It wants us to be more and be better yogis and hold our breath longer and hold our position longer and get our foot behind our head without breaking our hip off, you know. I mean, we're always trying to make ourselves better. So surrender in this case would allowing ourselves to just be who we are and not fixing it up all the time. But it's very hard because we're brought up in a culture and our parents, the same. They were always doing that. So it's radical to even think about not doing that. And to actually find a way to see all the ways that we do that is pretty interesting. So one does not surrender. Asking the ego or the mind to kill the ego is like asking the thief to be the policeman. There'll be a lot of investigation. No arrest will ever be made. So little by little, you plant the seeds that push out the weeds as time goes on. Just to try to become a good human being is really a big thing. I mean, the great saints, they are what human beings can become. They are who we are trying to become, what we're trying to do. So about gurus, read the books about the gurus themselves, not philosophy. Read what they did. Read about their lives, how they treated people, how they acted. See, absorb kind of how they lived in this world. It does something to you. It changes something. It shows you what's possible, but in a very deep way, not in a mental way. Some of them were like completely crazy. One great saint, he used to go into this little cage, and he lived in a cage for years. And he said, "The more I suffer, the better it is for you." And he did. And that was what he did. I'm not suggesting. But just to see how free these beings are, and how non-judgmental they are, and how they navigate their lives. It's quite amazing. When I was in Rishikesh last, they gave me a bunch of books. They always give me a bunch of books published by the Divine Life Society. So they gave me this little pamphlet, thin little pamphlet. It was how God came into my life by Swami Sivananda. And you know how God came into his life? Because he was a doctor and treating people and seeing all the suffering. It was through that he found spiritual reality through helping people. That's how his life changed around. Maharaj's teaching was very simple. Love everyone, feed everyone, remember God.
Thanks. Yeah. I heard that Maharaji said that it's better to love everything than to try to figure it all out.
Yeah. Everyone, he said.
Oh, everyone.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to love a light bulb necessarily, but people.
Do you have a recipe for that?
Ram Nam Karna se sab pura ho jata hai. If I'm going on repeating these names, everything is accomplished. Now he said that, and I've heard that 1 billion times in the last long time. If I really believed it, if I really believed it, what else would I be doing? And to the extent that I believe it, to the percentage point that I believe it, that's how much practice I do. No more, no less. But still, I know he said it. I know it must be true. And I waste so much time. It's extraordinary. So that's the recipe. Just repeat the name. Whenever you remember, whenever you're doing, doesn't matter. You don't have to be sitting still. You don't have to be cross-legged. You don't have to take a bath first. You don't have to click a mala. You don't have to count. Just in the mind, whatever name you like. They're all the names of that being that lives within us, of that love that lives within us. They're the names of what we're looking for every day in the outside world, because it's all within us. I had a nervous breakdown in the temple once, in the summer of '72. I was so afraid of romantic relationships that I avoided everything, and I was celibate the whole time I was in India. So Maharaj started teasing me about getting married. And the more he teased me, the more I started to shake. And then one day, one of the women said to me, do you think if two people are supposed to be together, do you think Maharaji would put them together? I said, yeah. And then she said, why don't you ask Maharaji to marry us? Well, later that day, we're sitting with Maharaji, and he points like next to me. So I said, and there was a guy sitting there. Sometimes I would translate simple things for people. I said, him? Nay, nay. There was another guy. Him? Nay, nay, nay. And I turn in, and it's her. And he looks at me and he says, do you love her? And I said, oh, yes, I love her as a sister so much. And he laughed. Oh, Krishna is very cunning. But he kept on teasing me, and he was driving me out of my mind, really, and he knew what he was doing. So one day, the Shah family came for their yearly Guru Puja. They came to the temple with all this stuff and everything, and all the Westerners rushed into the room to be in the puja. And now you see, they brought a blanket for Maharaji. Maharaji always wore a blanket. Dada used to say he had two blankets. He had the outer blanket and an inner blanket that hid his true nature from us, because we just couldn't, it was too much. So I wanted that blanket, because what would happen is he would take the new blanket, take the old blanket off and give it to somebody and put on the new blanket. In my state of mind, that blanket was like God. I wanted it. So I'm standing in the back, and sure enough, they do the puja and everything. Then they offer him the blanket. He takes off his blanket, and he looks right at me, and he throws it to the guy next to me. I heard a crack of thunder. And it was my mind. And he immediately said, well, give him the Gita, read the Gita. Go ahead, read the Gita. Go in the back and sit there and read the Gita. I was like, okay. I went back to this room and in the back. I was sitting there and I'm reading. Oh, I forgot to mention also, one of the reasons that I was so fragile at that point was that a woman that I'd been in a relationship with early on, actually my first relationship, had just killed herself. And then she came to see me at night, and she wasn't happy with me. Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you do something for me, right? So as we were walking down the street in my dream, I was talking to her, and she was chilling out and softening. Her eyes were softening. And then, boom, I left her there. And I woke up. And I was like, whoa. So I ran to the temple. And I dragged Dada in to translate. So I'm telling Dada the whole story about this woman. And as I'm telling the story, Maharaji starts saying over and over in Hindi, he was saying, 2 days before, just repeating that as I'm telling Dada the story. Now, the minute I finished telling Dada the story, without any translating to Maharaji, he looks at me and he said, 2 days before she died, she thought of you. That's why this has come back to you like that. Then he bops me on the head and said, don't worry, she won't bother you anymore. And I said, Baba, what about her? Will she have a good birth? And he said, yes, she'll have a good birth. That's the only time I ever heard him, well, there's 2 times, 3 times maybe, actually talk about rebirth. He never talked about that stuff. So, anyway, so then that's one of the reasons I was so fragile. So then now I'm sitting there in this room, and I'm reading the Gita, and I'm reading the part, the soul is not born, it doesn't die, you can't cut it, you can't, and etc., etc. And then the book falls from my hands, and this black hole opens up in the floor in front of me, like a slow motion whirlpool, like this. And I'm being drawn down into it. And there's no resistance. I'm just going down into this hole. When all of a sudden, somebody comes to the door and says, Krishna Das, what? Maharaj is calling. Okay. So then I made my way down to the front of the temple. And by the time I got there, I was weeping. I just fell in his lap. And he just sat there, really quiet, which was also unusual. And he let me cry. Many years later, that guy who called me, he said, did I ever tell you what Maharaj really said that day? I said, no. He said, quick, go find Krishna Das before he kills himself. And he got there, and just as I was going into this black hole. It was quite amazing. So then I'm crying, and I say, what's wrong with me? I'm so selfish. All I do is think about myself. My heart goes, attachment. It's all attachment. I said, attachment. And they said, don't worry. You'll be happy when you're married. And I said, Baba, I want to marry you. And he laughed. He said, if you marry me, all you'll get is love. Because he knew what I wanted. He actually said, you won't get laid. And then he patted me on the head and sent me away, and then here we are. These things were happening around him a lot. Stuff would come up. He would, either directly or indirectly, situations would develop where stuff would happen with the person. Like all of a sudden, someone would burst out crying, for no apparent reason. And it was usually some kind of purification, some kind of like explosion of stuff that was then washed away in his love. We can't hide from ourselves. I wish we could, but we can't. So it behooves us to pay some attention to our lives and try to get it working the way we'd like it to work. Whatever that means to you. Each one of us has a whole different thing going on. But nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. So it's 1:30 and now I've depressed you enough. So that's it, right? Okay. Namaste.
So we want to thank Krishna Das so much for the words of wisdom and actually taking us to another sphere, right? Almost to be with Maharaji. So let's give him a big hand. And we're very much looking forward for tonight. Tonight we'll have the last concert for this time with Krishna Das, Nina Rao and Arjun. And until next year, so already start planning the next time, right? Hopefully. And we'll conclude with the mantras. Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma mritorgamaya mritorma mritam gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace Peace Peace. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Ambalo Satguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Ambalo Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. Let's give another big hand to Krishna Das.